The Medford and Anonymous Series, Part 1.
Okay, well, we're going to give a call to Anonymous to see if he can give us some insights on the significance and relevance of the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
Hello?
Anonymous.
Yeah, how do you know? Don't tell anybody. Yes, young man, I've been paying attention to your YouTube enlightenment series. I'd just like to say I find them very authentic and honest, and I appreciate those symbols that come along too, those eagles and the encounter with a turtle, symbol for longevity upon this turtle island, the Indians would say. Do say. The snake, symbol for wisdom and knowledge and regeneration. And a whole skin. Yes, very interesting. So, yes, hence you found me. And what did you like to say to me, Bedford?
Well, I just wanted to see if you had any insights on the meaning of the resurrection. A lot of people take it lightly, but I think it has great significance to ourselves and to the world at large. Well,
indeed, if it be true, and I do believe, it certainly gives hope for a continuation of attempts to carry on and discover who we really are. So in that sense, it certainly gives hope to the folks who suffer, lose loved ones, and wonder, are they there? And so it's interesting. I find the whole story from Christmas to Easter to Pentecost, it's interesting how the most attention gets placed upon the birth of this young man, Son of God as we all are, but who obviously was very awakened. It gets the most attention. Even though we celebrate Christmas still, he was already born 2,000 years ago. So he's already grown. He's already gone through his crucifixion and resurrection. The part that gets the least amount of attention is the Pentecost, or the Holy Spirit coming upon us and we waking up to our cosmic consciousness of Christ consciousness. It's interesting, if you look at society and the attention of the media, they put the least amount of attention on the part of the story that will allow for the light or the enlightenment to continue. And obviously it's a time in the world where we certainly can use much more of that. So as far as to say about Easter, yes, today with Good Friday, yeah, I mean, and you look at history, for those who, whether they're religious or not out there, or spiritual, or whatever faith they're following, and all faiths are good that allow us to become more compassionate, thoughtful, and thought and deed to others. I would say it's something where we're being called, we're being called upon to partake also. I mean, we are entering the age of Aquarius, which is an age of not just believing, it's an age of actually knowing, experiencing. So in this sense, it's a continual story, and it's one that, it's a motion picture, it's not a snapshot, it's just like our lives, it's a motion picture. So, yeah, when you look at history, I dare anybody to look at any figure, any king or emperor or, queen or, politician or scientist or writer, label the leader. You'll be hard-pressed to find, taking away the religious element, even just in that person's life, you'd be hard pressed to find a more selfless example in world history. And that, I think, says a lot about how one is allowed to be used to discover one's authentic self and use it in a way to alleviate the suffering out here. In the sense of selfishness seems to be the static or the disconnect, and selflessness is what allows for the river to flow through us, or those energies, through the chakra system, as some would term it. So, whatever connotation people put in religious terms or whatever terms, just look at the man as a man, if you will, at that level for those who, they may not have grown up with some belief, or they grew up with belief, but their examples and their recipe of religion was just that. It was talked about. The food was talked about. They were never really given much to eat. So they walked away, they ran away. And we see the example of what people are taking to alleviate the pains that we feel. Like Buddha would say, the first noble truth is life is suffering. And indeed, we see it all around us. We feel it ourselves. So, although he also pointed the way out. So, all I would say again is look to the people out there, whoever you study, look to the people who are experiencing these higher realities, these bridges between the conscious, so-called subconscious, that wilderness that Dante was lost in, to the bridge to get to the superconscious mind. So indeed, it's like going to sleep tonight. We're sleeping, but yet we're watching our dreams. So what part of us is still awake? And how do we get to that? That's the goal of, whatever, again, connotations and words people put on these things that, whatever they are, whether they're spiritual, religious, or psychological, or just plain, language words. No words completely say what we're totally talking about. But they are indicators towards experiences one can have to know, again, in this age of Aquarius, what is truth? Who are we? Why are we here? Where do we come from? So indeed, the message of, Easter is a message of, in essence, it's like why this man came and exemplified it, the truths that he lived. To say that there is no death. We come from an eternal, being. Science, they'd say energy can't be destroyed. The only difference people of that caliber would say is, it's true. There's an energy, there's a spirit, but it has a consciousness. It's not just haphazard, there's an intelligence to this, manifestations. And who else would you trust? Look at the folks out here trying to pull us this way and that way. The man wanted nothing from anybody. He didn't want the power. He certainly could have had the nation or city. He didn't want any woman or man. He didn't want the abundance of money that would have been offered him. And isn't that what most of these people we see out here now, or most of us strive for? To ultimately end up realizing, even those who get it, especially those who get those things in what to say, immoral ways, look at their faces. Do they end up saying, like, Peggy Lee, is that all there is? They may not say it, verbally because of the ego, or the negative use of the ego, but you can see it in their eyes, you can see it in their forced smiles. Something is missing.
Well, that's a good point. It's like, I think every man sort of comes to that place. Is this all there is? Is there something else? Even if you attain the greatest riches, it seems like he came in and said there is something else.
That was the purpose of his coming. There is something else, and there are ways of getting in touch with it. And they aren't just being like a parrot, like most of these preachers and teachers. You look out there, they learn it intellectually, and they mouth it like a parrot, like a controller, just saying, the kingdom is within, a parrot doesn't know what it's saying. They mean well, but many of them have their own problems, as we know. The drinking and abuses, because their energies, they listen. They just look at their dinner, and they're out in the garden. They fell asleep 3 times, you know. And he said, okay, get your rest. You're going to need it because his third eye was open. He didn't need a phone call to know that the soldiers were coming after him, and the fake priests, the politicians. He didn't need a phone call, but he was trying to show them how to get the strength that he contacted that allowed him to face crucifixion. You look at these world leaders. Everybody's climbing that mountain of truth. But when you look at the capstone of that pyramid, I defy anybody to find a more persistent, consistent example of selflessness on behalf of his fellow man and woman. Just stop with all the indoctrinations. Just look at the man's life. When he fed the hungry, he helped. He used it to heal people. I didn't myself, but it's a healing. I just watched movies growing up. I was trying to let me turned off by just being talked down upon, or focused on the hell forever from a God of love. I don't buy that anymore. I realize that God's love is, her love is so surpassing our thoughts. But if anybody's conclusion with all their studies is that people who are ignorant will be put in hell and burned forever, from a loving God, that's not the God I worship. It's a God of life. Choose now today, life or death. I choose to worship the living God. It's like a tree, all these branches are striving towards the nourishment of the light, the sunlight, and all have different perceptions of where that sun is. But the higher the branch, it should be, and it would be, a person more compassionate. Because once they were a low branch too, and they didn't see as much as they see now. It's like, one of my favorite, I got to say, one of my favorite Bible teachers, if not favorite one, is a man named Casey. And if anybody out there lacks faith or uninspired or hurt by the neglect that, we've all been put through, check this man out. He was a Bible teacher, 8th grade education, didn't go beyond 8th grade, didn't read, but knew more than anybody, went to school. How is that possible? He not only predicted the Dead Sea Scrolls, which are the oldest writings from the time of Jesus. For 2,000 years, these brainiacs and all their studies, these Jesuits, they didn't think these scenes were important. We always hear about the Sadducees, the Pharisees. Well, he passed away in 1945. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1947. He had said for 20 years they'll find them and what to say. It took the brainiacs 55 years to admit some of what it says. And, they admitted Mary, Joseph, and John the Baptist belonged to this group up in Mount Carmel. They weren't in the mainstream church. Somehow, mainstream churches with all the business, accounting the money, and just speaking for the head for the most part, most of them, never say all, because they're mystics in the church, and just as there are, mystics in every religion. It's only a few who really put it into practice. When you look at history, I dare anybody to look at any figure, any king or emperor or, queen or, politician or scientist or writer, label leader. You'd be hard-pressed to find, taking away the religious element, even just in that person's life, you'd be hard-pressed to find a more selfless example in world history. So indeed, the message of Easter is a message of, in essence, it's like why this man came and exemplified it, the truths that he lived. To say that there is no death. We come from an eternal, being. The man wanted nothing from anybody. He didn't want the power. He certainly could have had the nation or city. He didn't want any woman or man. He didn't want these abundance of money that would have been offered him. Isn't that what most of these people we see out here now, most of us strive for?